योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासुधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्। So as we saw last time, we are looking at the topic of Chitta Parikarma, and we saw that Parikarma means cleaning, purifying. Okay, it is also a term used not in the sense of like a deep cleaning. Okay, so it is more a surfacial cleaning and preparation. It's sort of finishing and polishing and so on. And we have been looking at multiple alternatives for Chitta Parikarma. And last time we started with a new alternative, which, as we described, is also slightly mystic or esoteric in nature. And in some sense, in our journey through the sutras so far, this is probably the first instance where we are coming into this realm, which one could say that it is between the pure abstract philosophical concepts and a very practical worldly concepts, right? So this is a slightly somewhere about alaukika, otherworldly, divine, but with specifics and not in terms of pure abstract thought. And there is a reason for that, as Vyasa explains. Why do we have to enter into that realm is clearly explained in the Bhashya, which we were not able to cover last time, so we'll do it today. So the sutra is 1.35, and as we saw last time, it is Vishayavati va pravrittir utpanna manasaha sthiti nibandhini. So there is this Vishayavati pravritti. Okay. So when it emerges, the utpanna Vishayavati pravritti, what is its prayojanam? What does it do? Right? Manasaha sthiti nibandhini. Okay, so it binds the mind, manas, to a state of sthiti. Okay? Attaining a state of sthiti is essential for the further journey. Okay, so the ability to attain a state of sthiti where the alambanam, the support of the chitta, the shape and form, remains steady, right? Prashantavahita sthitihi, it remains steady, then it can take to ekagrata and further. Right? And that is why the Vishayavati Pravritti is one of the means, not the only means, to arrive at sthiti, but it also has a special prayojanam, a special purpose, which we will see soon. Now to repeat what we saw last time, what is this Vishayavati, right? So like Prashant sir also covered last time, so Vishaya is the objects of Indriyas. So the Indriyas are a way for the embodiment to interact with the world, either through sensing or through acting. Okay? The objects of these Indriyas are the Vishayas, and the essential fundamental units of these Vishayas are Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, which is the object of sound, the fundamental unit of sound, and so on. So those are what the Vishaya means. And Vishayavati, so this is a suffix called a Matup Pratyayaha. So as you know, there is a Shriman, Srimati. Okay? So that's a Matup Pratyaya. So similarly, Vishayavati. So this particular pravritti, in some sense, it has the Vishayas in the sense of, so phalatvena, okay, so in terms of the resultant state of this pravritti, is a samvit or a sakshatkara, a yathartha jnanam. So a fundamental, real, complete understanding of the Vishayas is what this pravritti is constituted of. So it is a Vishayavati pravritti. Okay. So now the Bhashya begins by prescribing certain areas, certain places where it says there has to be the manasaha dharanam, okay, or the dharana, where so I'll read the first line. It says nasikagre dharayataha asya ya divya gandha samvit sa gandha pravritihi. So nasikagre means sort of the front of the nose, the tip of the nose. Dharayataha, the yogi. So dharayataha is a qualification of the yogi here. Okay, it's like an adjective of the yogi. So one who has confined his awareness in the front of the nose or the tip of the nose, he gets a divya gandha samvit. So divya refers to its alaukika nature. It is not this worldly smell. Okay, so it is beyond this world, the essential understanding. Samvit means samyak vetti anena iti samvit. So the other word which is more commonly known is sakshatkara, a direct perception of, to get the real understanding, okay, of the divya gandha. When that happens, the state of the chitta at that time is said to be with a chitta having the gandha pravrittihi. Okay, so this is the gandha side of the Vishayavati pravritti, with gandha as the Vishaya. Okay. Next are the listed other areas. Jimva agre rasa samvit. So the jimva means the tongue, agre again the front or the tip. That gives the sakshatkara of the rasa among the Vishayas. Taluni rupa samvit. Now talu is the roof of the mouth, and if you look at, so there are these Vedangas, okay, Shiksha, Vyakarana, Chanda, Jyotisha and so on. So Shiksha is about the pronunciation, okay, and all the Vedangas are Veda Rakshanaya, are for the protection of the parampara of the Vedas, okay. So the Shiksha is about the right pronunciation, and there it says that the Talu area is where the cha, cha, ja, ja letters are uttered. That is where the tongue hits the roof of the mouth. That area is the Talu. So here Vyasa is saying the Rupa Samvit. Rupa is corresponds to the sense of the visual sense and its object. So that is the area for Rupa Samvit. Jimma Madhye. So at the middle of the tongue, Sparsha Samvit. So this is about Sparsha or touch. Jimva Mule, Shabda Samvit. Okay. So these are the areas I have been listed. Iti etaha vrittayaha utpannaha chittam stithau nibadnanti. Now we will look at the effects, the phalam, the prayojanam, and there are multiples. So one is chittam stithau nibadnanti. So this is what is already covered in the sutra itself. Okay. So when the sakshatkara happens and the alaukika, the pratyaksha of these fundamental vishayas are attained, what happens? Chittam sthitau. Sthitau means in sthiti. Nibadnanti is bound. Okay, so the chitta gets a state of sthiti that can continue with time. It is not going to waver. Okay. Samshayam vidamanti. So now there is a lot of further elaboration of this point. So samshaya means doubt or questioning. Okay. So the teaching of the acharya about the yoga shastra, one might have a doubt. Is it really true? I have never seen the Purusha. What is this chitta? And so on. So here it says samshayam vidamanti, and there is further elaboration of how this samshaya goes away. So I will not get into that right away. The third is samadhi prajnayam cha dwari bhavanti. So there is the samadhi prajna, there is a special kind of prajna that leads to samadhi, okay, and pertains to samadhi. For that, dwari bhavanti. So it becomes like a gateway to reach the Samadhi Prajna. So this is just the beginning, this is the Sthiti, there is Ekagrata and so on, but it becomes a gateway to Samadhi Prajna, and later we'll see that it is bound to happen without any obstacle. Okay, we'll come there. So there are, let us see that there are three specific phalani listed here. One is Sthito Nibadnanti, second Samshayam, so doubt, Vidamanti, removes away all the doubts in relation to this whole subject. Okay, and we'll see why there is a doubt, how it gets removed later. And Samadhi Prajnayam cha dwari bhavanti. So in the Samadhi Prajna, it becomes a gateway to the Samadhi Prajna.
The interesting point to be noted here with reference to the sutra, the senses and their objects, they have correspondence. There are 5 senses for 5 kinds of objects. Now, when we just consider senses, it won't be complete consideration of the senses, because there is something also called psychosensory complex. Psychosensory complex. The senses and mind together have a different effect altogether. Otherwise, by eyes we would have just seen the visual object. By ears we would have just heard the auditory objects. But that is not the case. When we see a visual object, we also get a state of mind. Our eyes are not just cameras, our ears are not just tape recorders. Similarly, the case of nose, it just doesn't register the olfactory object or the smell or odor. It goes beyond, works in the realm of mind. So when you are sighting something, you don't just sight it, you also have a state of mind, such as either you will be sorrowed or you will be delighted. Any sensory stimulation causes such a state, triggers the state of mind. Either you are happy or you are not happy. Either you are little happy or very happy, or little sorrowed or enormously sorrowed. That means sensory acts work on the mind. This is an important consideration. Otherwise, our senses could have been mechanical devices like camera, perceives, clicks something, registers something. The camera is not sad for unsightly objects being clicked. The camera is not happy for beautiful objects being clicked. So that's the mechanical eye. We don't have mechanical eyes. We don't have mechanical ears. Senses immediately work on the state of mind. So they have direct connection with the mind. Now, about the visual organ, say, let's take an example of visual organ. The organ of the eyes for human beings is of one kind. We cannot imagine what might be happening for other creatures when they sight the same object. If I show you a flower, rose flower, beautiful flower, fresh flower, it will make you happy, delighted. That doesn't mean the rose will do the same to cat, mouse, rabbit, horse, any other animal, birds, sparrows, crows. We can get bewitched by the sight of rose. We can't say that that happens to other eyes of other animals, subhumans. So what might be happening to them is our conjecture. We'll have to imagine. Not that nothing happens to them. Even between human beings, the concept of human beauty changes in different people. What is beautiful to you and me? A beautiful form of human being, beauty of a face, handsomeness of a face. What is it to you and me, and what is it to some tribes, some African aboriginals, Australian aboriginals, we have no idea. What is beautiful for us may be not so beautiful for them, could be even ugly. Could be even ugly. So within human beings, again, there is such a range. It is not general. What is beautiful to me may not be beautiful to you. Is that right? What is sonorous to me may not be sonorous to you. Is that right? The smell, what is good for me, relishable, may not be relishable for you. You might even dislike. Within human minds also, we really do not know. It's not a standard reaction of the mind when it comes to human beings. Now, we have to also imagine what must be happening to someone who is above human consciousness rung, a step above. There is a verse in Bhagavad Gita where a realized person, spiritually realized person, has a different vision. What we see, just objects, and we characterize the object. This is mic, this is black, this is blanket, this is rose, this is river, that is sea, that is ocean, that is mountain. But we do not have anything perception beyond it, because our level of consciousness is normal and human. But someone who is above the human level of consciousness, it will be different. Not only different, it will be essential. If we argue whether my perception is right or your perception is right, how will we solve the problem? Whether my citing the rose and saying it is beautiful and you saying it is not beautiful, can we have a conclusion drawn justifiably? We'll have to say, okay, you believe what you believe, I will believe what I believe, I will perceive what I perceive, you perceive what you perceive. Now none of us have a real perception. Ours are empirical perceptions. Rose as rose is actually not a reality. Reality is something beyond. Rose being rose, lotus being lotus. Now, Bhagavad Gita, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini Shuni Chaiva Shvapakeja Panditaha Samadarshinaha. He has equal vision. Whether it is Vidya Vinaya Sampanna realized noble person. The reference here is not to caste. Get to know this. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini. There is no reference to caste, Brahman. One who is a realized person, sagacious person, wise person, Vidya Vinaya Sampanna, and then Gavi, cow, Hasti, elephant, Shuni, Shvapaka, dog, elephant, Chandala, Parya. He has even sight. How is he even sight? Is he hyponeurotic? Hyponeurotic person consider everything as identical. He is not hyponeurotic. He sees the reality. What does he see? He sees the Vasudeva in them. He sees the core principle, core aspect, essential aspect, the substrate. Understand this word. The substrate behind dog, cat, elephant, Parya, Chandala, a Brahmin, wise, noble man. The substrate is sighted by him. And that is why he has Samadarshina. He is because on a higher rung of consciousness, Vasudevam Sarvamiti. Again Bhagavad Gita. All this is him. Now that is actually reality. I seeing a stone as stone, boulder as boulder, brick as brick, mat and mat is not ultimate reality. It is not ultimate reality, because ultimately they are what? Even in the realm of physics, they are proton, neutron, electron. In the realm of nuclear physics or subatomic particles or particle physics, everything is one. Proton, neutron, electron. All matter is one. So even the physics has such a divergence. Physics has such a divergence. Now this is metaphysics. Metaphysics goes a step beyond and tells you what is beyond subatomic particles. What is substrate? Inherently what you call embodied is that principle, the divine principle. So a realized person will be having different visions, and that will be pertaining to reality. That means his senses can give him ultimate realities, whereas we, through our senses, only get worldly realities, physical realities, temporal realities, impermanent realities. How they are impermanent. If I see the rose, it is rose now. It's not going to be rose tomorrow. It is impermanent. Rose won't be rose tomorrow. Rose won't be rose after a week, or after 10 days, or after a week. It might after a month. It will be nothing but just earth. It will be just earth. So we have transient realities, and we are just considering that as our realities. So senses can also have capacity and probability and possibility and potentials to be going deeper than ephemeral realities, temporary realities, and they can go to ultimate realities. So our senses, as I said last time, Vaishyayika Vritti. They have Vaishyayika Vritti, and this is Vishayavati Vritti. So yogi is able to see something transcendent in the same object. We don't see the transcendent in the same object. We see what is the physical reality of an object, which is a temporary reality, which is a fleeting reality, and we all believe in it. So senses are capable of even Vishayavati Pravrutti. So we'll have to imagine what the yogis might be envisionment. If I and you, all of you, look at rose, and if a realized yogi looks at a rose, our perception will be common, or close to being common, or almost common, but his perception will be extraordinary. The senses are having that potential also. Ophthalmology will not tell you this. Any study of ophthalmology to any depth will not tell you what are potentials of the eyes, where the eyes can take you. They will not, where the eyes are now, only they will tell you. Where the eyes are now will be revealed by ophthalmologist. Where the eyes can take you can never be revealed. That's not subject matter of ophthalmologists. So Vishayavati Pravrutti is such a thing. Now if you recall, in the classes I have said, eyes, ears, these 5 organs become one organ. In the internal realm, eyes are not visual organs. There is nothing to envision within. There is no visual object within. There is no auditory object within. There is no olfactory object within. There is no tactile object within. There is no gustatory object within. There is only one object, which is a transcendent object. That's why we call them Jnanendriyas. It is worth, if you might recall, I have mentioned this in earlier sessions. They are called Jnanendriyas. Jnana is only one. Adhyatma Jnana Nityatvam Tatpa Jnana Atha Darshanam Etad Jnanam Iti Proktam Ajnanam Yadado Anyatha. Rest all is Ajnana. Only one is knowledge, Adhyatma Jnanam. So that's why we call them Jnanendriyas. In English they call them cognitive organs. Cognitive organs, Jnanendriyas do not mean the same. Cognitive organs will give you 5 cognitions. Cognitive organs will give you 5 cognitions, whereas Jnana is only one. There are no many Jnanas. There are not multiple Jnanas. Jnana is only one. And they become Jnanendriyas in the internal realm. That is why they have been called Jnanendriya in the metaphysical perspective. So the yogi's perception is totally different, which we have to just imagine as to what it might be. And therefore Vyasa says, even if you have realization of one aspect which is so a mysterious thing for us, then you will start developing conviction and belief in all those mysterious aspects. You need to have one experience. That's not an English word, good English word. We call it anubhuti. Anubhuti, anubhava. Anubhava is experience in English. Anubhuti is also experience in English. That is not proper. Anubhava is always with respect to grosser things, manifest and grosser things, and anubhuti is with respect to very subtle things. So there is no English word for anubhuti. So he says, if you have one anubhuti in the realm of mysticism, then you will start believing and you will be convinced that such things do exist. So that's why he says it is very important to have one experience, subtle experience, metaphysical experience, mysterious experience in life. Our life will be totally different. If you have greater insight into something, you can get somewhere insight. You can't get insight into everything, but somewhere you get a deep insight. Your behavior, conduct, thought process will be totally different. One such touch, it is called Parisasparsha, touchstone effect. Parisasparsha. So if you have one such experience in your life, the whole life will change for you. You need to get one such experience, one such mysterious experience, and the senses have that potentials because there is a Vishayavati Pravrutti. So yoga explores how the senses can be reformed, evolved, so that their acts get onto a higher rung. And then that is Vishayavati Pravrutti. Vaisheka Pravrutti is a common rung, general rung available to everyone. That's Vaisheka Pravrutti. But this is Vishayavati Pravrutti. And thing to be noted here that he has brought the term Manasa. Manasa Sthite Bandhani. Manas. He has not Chitta said Chitta. There is also some important purport behind it. Because as he said earlier, these are cosmetic processes. These are surface processes. These are not deep processes. So the mind is tip of the iceberg. Mind is upper surface or the cortex of Chitta. Chitta is something at an unfathomable depth. Like tip of the iceberg and iceberg. You can't even imagine by looking at the tip as to what can be the iceberg. How huge can be the iceberg? You will have no idea by looking at the tip of the iceberg. So tip of the iceberg and iceberg. Chitta is iceberg, Manas is tip of the iceberg, and that's why it is cosmetic. So the senses and mind are close, they are so close to each other, that's why this measure has been given. Then Divya, celestial experiences, extraterrestrial experiences are the effect of Vishayavati Pravrutti. And there he gives only two loci. One is tip of the nose and the other are 4 parts of the tongue. Tip of the nose and 4 parts of the tongue. So Divya Sparsha, Divya Rupa, Divya Gandha, Divya Rasa, etc., etc. So extraterrestrial. What is extraterrestrial figuratively? Something it is not terrestrial is not extraterrestrial figuratively. That is literal meaning. Figuratively you say, oh, it is awesome. It is out of the world. It is grand. It is enormous. It is fantastic. It is incredible. That is the figurative meaning of extraterrestrial. So yogi gets extraterrestrial, Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. And that is not by the 5 senses, but one tongue, accompanied by tip of the nose. So it's worth inquiry as to what is tip of the nose and what are the 4 parts of the tongue. As I said last time, tongue has taste buds for you and me. The tongue has only taste buds insofar as gustatory objects are concerned. Otherwise, they say, a mystic saint says, our tongue is nothing but a gutter insofar as our speech is concerned. Insofar as our speech is concerned, it is nothing but gutter. Now, on a higher plane of the tongue, which is called esoteric physiology or esoteric anatomy or esoteric tongue, he says there are buds for terrestrial pleasures, terrestrial delights, terrestrial happiness and terrestrial cognitions, terrestrial perceptions. Divya sparsha, shabda sparsha, rupa rasa gandha. Now you can understand why Saraswati resides in the tongue, which is in a spitful cavity. See, once you spit from the mouth, you don't like to touch it even. As long as it was in the mouth, it was touching you. There was no problem. There was no problem. As long as it was in the mouth, it was touching you, no problem. But you spit on some surface or the floor and you won't touch it. Why? Is the floor untouchable? No. Your spit is untouchable. It's obnoxious for us. And Saraswati resides there because of the esoteric status. Because of the esoteric status, not for exoteric status, esoteric status. Anyway, that's the aspect of Adi-Daivic constitution of ours. So when you go for deep studies of senses, which I said is worthwhile, then you will have to understand Adi-Daivic constitution of our embodiment. Where are the deities residing? What are the deities of the five senses? Etc., etc. But anyway, that's not the topic in your syllabus at the moment. Okay?
स्थितौ निबध्नन्ति संशयं विदमन्ति and samadhi prajnayam chadvari bhavanti. Now further,
see, otherwise there are a lot of apprehension and doubts about somebody speaks fantastic. When the yogi's experiences, we won't believe, we'll say maybe it is nonsense. Is that right? Or we will start doubting. We will have doubt, or we will say, oh, all bunkum, all nonsense. So if you have one such experience, such things will get away from your mind. You will not say something is nonsense when something is real, absolutely real. You will not say something is bunkum, something is to be overlooked. So you need to have one experience of such things. And yoga is a portal. It's a portal for you to enter into it, and at some point in time when you are ripe, you will get one experience. If you got one experience, then all these postulations will become meaningful. Until then, it is just a fantasy. So he says, see that they don't remain fantasy. They don't remain fantasy for you. Get one experience, such an experience, out of the world experience. Unbelievable, incredible experience. So that's Vyasa stresses, that get one experience, then it will open out the whole spectrum of mysticism.
Vyasa also sort of expands the scope of this. He says the dharana with respect to Chandra, Aditya, Graha, Mani and so on, that also is to be called Vishayavati Pravritti. Okay. So now at this point, I think so for example, for a doubt that might come, especially if you've been studying the Bhagavad Gita, is, in general, the advice is to stay away from the Vishayas. Okay? So how does this parikarma, which is supposed to be an initial state to embark on the yogic path, how is it prescribing the direction of Vishayavati Pravritti? Okay? So for example, Gita says, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha Sangasteshu Upajayate Sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho vijayate, and so on. It takes the destruction of the person as he gets more and more attached to the Vishayas. Okay? So here we have to understand that this aspect of the Vishayavati Pravritti is not to do with attachment to the objects. This is to do with the Sakshatkara, or the essential understanding of what these objects are and what are the fundamental constituents of Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. And when that happens, when the true understanding arises, what comes about is Vairagya. Okay, so once you have understood it, the desire and the infatuation towards it fades away, because now you know the essential form of it. Okay, so that is the direction of the Vishayavati Prajna, which in some sense again the Gita talks about in the 4th chapter. It says, Shrotradin Indriyani Anye Sanyamagnishu Juvati. Right? So here what is happening is, this is about the Indriya based in some sense yajna, sacrifice, into Sanyama, restraint. Then it says Shabdadini Vishayani Anye Indriyagnishu Juvati. Okay, so that line of Bhagavad Gita, which is talking about the Shabdadi Vishayaha being sacrificed, so this is in this 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the framework of yajna is used to describe several things beyond what is typically considered yajna. Okay, so here it is saying Shabdadini Vishayani, which is similar to what we are talking about here, which is the essential Vishayas. Those are Indriyagnishu Juvati. It is being sacrificed in the Agni of the form of Indriyas. That is a visual metaphor to help us understand what is happening here. So now Vyasa will describe in detail how this helps and why this parikarma has been described prescribed in the first place. So he says, Yadyapi hi tattat shastranumana acharya upadeshaihi avagatam artha-tattvam sadbhutam eva bhavati etesham yatabhutartha pratipadana samarthyat. So even though the various teachings from the Shastras, from Anumana, which is inference, from Acharyopadesha, from the teachings of the teacher, the preceptor, the Guru, the validity is well known. Okay? Why? Because the samarthya of those sources of knowledge, because everybody knows that they are capable of giving out true knowledge, the validity of knowledge is well known. Right? Even still, tathapi, yavad, ekadeshopi, kaschit, na swakarana samvedyo bhavati. Still, until at least one aspect of that doesn't become directly understood by our own instruments, through our own perception, through direct experience. Tavat sarvam paroksham iva. So until that point, everything is paroksha. Paroksha means something that happened in my absence. When I was not there, I have no direct knowledge. For example, if you look at the writing of the epics, the Ramayana and so on, that uses a specific form of the verbs. It is called lit verb, the lit lakaraha. The meaning of the lit is paroksham. So whenever, in the Sanskrit verb forms, in the English we'll say this happened, right? But there is a different form of the verb when you say this happened when I was there and I saw, as opposed to this happened somewhere else where I couldn't have seen, right? So when Valmiki writes Ramayana, he chooses to use the lit form because he is telling the story of Rama which is not happening in his direct presence. Okay, so that is paroksham. So here Vyasa is saying, even though everything everybody knows is valid, whatever is being taught is valid, until there is direct experience by a student, everything becomes paroksham iva, as though it is paroksham. Apavargadishu sukshmeshu artheshu na drudam buddhim utpadayati. So now the buddhi, the tendency, the leaning towards apavarga, okay, so the direction of detachment, etc., all the teachings such as apavarga and the subtle teachings, the buddhi doesn't become druda. It is not firmly established. There is always wavering, there is always doubt. Even though there is a basic understanding that all this is true, all this is valid, until there is direct experience, there is always wavering and there is always doubt. Okay? So this is being established. Vyasa is doing that very clearly by sort of reaching out to normal practitioners who Vyasa understands that there are doubts. Okay, so and people may not be fully, so to speak, bought in to this. Right? Tasmat Shastranumana Acharya Upadesha Upadvalanartham Eva Avashyam Kaschit Artha Visheshaha Pratyakshi Kartavyaha. And therefore, for the complete faith, right, so complete sort of belief in all the teachings, he says at least pick some Artha Visheshaha, any specific object, and Pratyakshi Kartavyaha. So get a Sakshatkara of that, that is to be done. So that once and for all, this whole aspect of doubt is completely goes away. Now, how does it completely go away? Tatra tad upadishta arthaika desha pratyakshatve sati. So when that happens, even for one specific object, sarvam sukshma vishayam api apavargat shraddhiyate. So even if you get this kind of a sakshatkara, which is out of the normal, for at least one thing, then everything else, right up to the subtlest, okay, there is a faith. I mean, the English word faith, like we have seen, doesn't completely reflect what is Shraddha, but the faith up to Apavarga Shraddhiyate. So the yogi automatically gains the faith even through just one experience which is out of the normal. Then everything else, all the obstacles of this nature goes away. Etad artham eva. Only for this, okay, idam chitta parikarma nirdishyate. So this particular chitta parikarma is slightly different from what we have seen so far. Okay. So it may appear strange. Why do I have to go and dharana on this particular place to get a rupa sakshatkar? What is the point? So here it is saying etad artham eva, for this specific purpose only, to remove these doubt on the subject once and for all, this particular chitta parikarma nirdishyate. Anyatasu vrittishu tad vishayayam vashikara sanyam upajatayam. Okay, so when in various vrittis about these vishayas, about these objects, there is a vashikara sanya. If you remember the sutras on Vairagya, once there's this vashikara sanya, the complete detachment, okay, and we looked at multiple stages of this, and in the Apara Vairagya, the top was vashikara sanya. So when that arises, chittam samartham syat tasya arthasya pratyakshi karanaya iti. So now to get that sakshatkara, to get that pratyakshi karana, to get the jnanam, it has to come to vashikara sanya. So the detachment, once it arises, then the chitta becomes capable. Chittam samartham syat pratyakshi karanaya. And then you get a pratyakshi karanaya, pratyaksham for some object, and then that you can move on, removing the doubt once and for all, and firmly embark on the path of yoga. That's what is being said. Tatha cha sati. In that manner, when that happens, Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhiyoho asya apratibandena bhavishyanti iti. So now, when this happens, there is Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi. Now, you should sort of remember the sutra which we had seen. First we had seen Bhava Pratyaya Videya Prakriti Leyanam. So for celestial beings, the path to Asamprajnata Samadhi is through the very nature of the being. Okay? But for yogi, for humans, it was something else. And it was Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna. Okay? And that takes to Samprajnata and then Asamprajnata. That sutra had clearly mentioned that. That sutra is being linked here because it says Tatha cha sati. When something like that happens, Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhiyoho asya apratibandena bhavishyati. So it will happen in the future. So bhavishyati is a future form. Apratibandena, without any doubt, without any obstacle, it is bound to happen. Okay, so this particular chitta parikarma has a sort of a slightly different place and a unique place of removing the doubt on this path to be adopted. Once that goes away, inevitably it is going to go through the Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna and so on and get to the yogic path. So that is what Vyasa is saying.
With reference to the pair of senses and mind, important to the thing to be noted, understand this. I said in the beginning, if you look at the rose, you become happy. You get delight. The object is giving you delight. So the senses can give a state of mind. Positive or negative state of mind can come through the gates of senses. It's also other way around. Suppose you are already sorrowed, in a deep sorrow, I show you rose, it makes no impact. It makes no impact. Rose doesn't give you pleasure. Otherwise the rose is capable of giving you pleasure. Just because the state of mind which is already there in you, it overpowers the beauty of the rose and you don't pay any cognizance to the rose. So the state of mind also influences the functioning of the senses as much as the senses can be influencing the functioning of the mind. Your state of mind will change because of the senses, and your the state of mind also can be overweighing the sensory processes, and you will not get the effect of the objects, whether beautiful or unsightly. So mind behind the senses and the sensory objects both are modifiable. You can modify, you can replace the object. If you don't like an object, you can remove it from your sight and put another beautiful object in front of you. So objects can be modified. If you don't like an object, you can just replace it with a good object, or you can turn your back. And the other one is to change the state of the mind. So if the state of the mind is also changed, objects will not bother you. So for a case of a saint, their minds are such that whatever the object, it doesn't bother them. Otherwise we are hypersensitive and the mind is immediately influenced by objects. But in case of a yogi, the mind is so powerful that the state of mind doesn't influence through get influenced through the senses. Now suppose you are standing at the, say, let us imagine we are in Paris and we are at the base of Eiffel Tower. Now there are so many people, so you will say, I like someone, I don't like someone. I don't like this person at all, or I like this person very much, etc., etc. There are so many objects, there are so many cars. You say, I am bewitched by this car, I like this car, I love this car, I don't like this car. So many objects are there which you will like or you won't like. Now you start scaling and you get onto the top of Eiffel Tower. Objects are same. Objects are same. You like them or you don't like them. The people are same. You like them or you don't like them. But when you are at the top of the Eiffel Tower, you don't identify what is it that you like and what is it that you don't like. That's called Shailastha Vritti. Vyasa somewhere brings that also. Shaila means hilltop, mountain. When you are on the top of the mountain, that is when you are at that height like Eiffel Tower, it doesn't bother whether the person is one who you like or you hate, whether you love or loathe, they make no impact on your mind. So this is again a process that can be applied. The moment you don't like something, turn the binoculars the other way around and look at them. Eyes have, they are binoculars because of the mind behind it. What happens if you don't like, you actually look through them through binoculars. You get more agitated, irritated, infuriated. Turn it the other way around. Imagine that they are at a long distance. You are not able to identify that this is this person whom I don't like. Like on the top of the tower, you don't identify the person whom you don't like. Therefore, you don't have the reaction of not liking. So this is possible in a sensory complex, mind sense combinations. If you like something, yes, then have the close-up, zoom in. If you don't like it, zoom out. so that your mind is protected. So the practical aspects of yoga, philosophy of yoga gives you such instructions. Because we are not transcendent. We are not transcendent in the consciousness. We are still on human level of consciousness. So what to do with senses? We have only one measure. If you don't like, you close your eyes. You close your eyes, your mind will be still seeing that this person is around me, I can smell the person, and the mind will be spoiled. So somewhere you can close the eyes, but you cannot close your ears. Understand this. Now suppose there is an auditory object. It can be loving or hating objects. You can't close your eyes. Even if you close your eyes, you are going to hear it. You can close your eyes. Blindfold your eyes. There are certain senses. You can't close them. How the stimulations are going to work on you. Therefore, the mind must be well trained, and through yoga you get this training. Don't think yoga is fitness program, wellness program. By doing all this you get wellness of body and wellness of mind. That's not yoga. It cultures your mind. Then you have this equipment within you. Like professional photographers, they don't carry just one camera. You know, they have huge bag hanging on their shoulders. They have to have many lenses, many filters, many films, etc. So similarly, if you practice yoga, you will get this equipment on your shoulder. So you will not be easily getting irritated by irritable objects, nor bewitched by bewitching objects. They will be there. So understand, if bewitching object is in front of you, bewitchment is going to end in a negative condition. It's not going to be a happy condition. So what will you do? So yoga gives you, it gives you the whole baggage on your shoulders, various lenses, telescopic lenses, zoom lenses, zoom in, zoom out, both can be done. So you can zoom out as and when convenient, zoom in as and when convenient. If your loving object is at a long distance and you are not able to identify, zoom in and you will identify, oh, this is the person I like, and your mind will be elated. So yoga, because the psychosensory studies, yoga gives you equipments, and that's why even in being in the world, you won't be disturbed by the world. Otherwise, you're all going by our box camera. Do you know what is a box camera? Absolutely amateur camera. Amateur camera. And that's why we are irritated, our minds are unsafe when we move in the world. So if you have sufficiently initiated into yoga, you have such equipments with you. So you wear sunglasses when it's bright out. So you'll have sunglasses like thing. Some objects you have to see with different glasses, then they will not bother you at all. Suitable glasses should be used for different objects. So yoga technology has all these aspects. So there is a complete one limb of yoga. Understand this. Complete one limb of yoga dedicated to senses called pratyahara. It's an enormous subject matter in pratyahara. First reading will tell you just abstraction of the senses. And that's not just abstraction of the senses. There's so many things in pratyaharic techniques. So senses are a great bounty for us. It's not just to get perceptions and cognitions, because they work on our state of minds. Senses work on state of mind, and not just on cognitions and perceptions. So this is a sutra which is at the gateway. It brings you to the gateway of mysticism. Beyond that, mysticism will be there. So that's why he says, get at least one experience, kartavyam. It is your duty to get such experience, just one. Other things will be coming in your conviction. You will start having more dedication, reinforced dedication, faith, etc., shraddha, etc. So that's why this sutra has come in the realm of senses.
So we looked at the role of this particular Chitta Parikarma. to remove the doubt with regard to the subject. Right? So there is a very nice analogy given in a text called the Shankara Vivarana, which I'll just tell you about. So firstly, what is this pravritti? So it says the Vishayavati pravritti. So what is the term pravritti? Pravrittir nama yogam abhyasyatah yoginaha abhimukhi bhavaha. Okay. So the pravritti is like a yogi who is studying yoga. Right? The yogi is coming face to face with the subject. Right? That particular bhava, okay, that particular state, that is the pravritti. Now, प्रतिपद्यमानस्य योगस्य यः प्रथमः अभिमुखी भावः प्रत्ययकरणो योगानुष्ठानं प्रत्युत्साहजननो. Okay, so now this particular yoga, as is being taught and sort of instated, the first prathamaha abhimukhi bhavaha, the first coming face to face with it, pratyaya which leads to that particular imprint, knowledge in the chitta, and yoganushtanam, so the establishment of yoga, pratyutsaha jananaha, which creates so there is, see, initially there is raw enthusiasm, this seems interesting and let us do it and so on. But when the reverse experience comes back to the yogi, that particular enthusiasm with the knowledge, right? So the dhriti, utsaha and so on, the pratyutsaha jananaha, that generates this kind of a enthusiasm. Now comes the very nice analogy. It says nirmathyamanasyaagnehe iva dhuma samudbhavaha sa pravrittihi. So this is like if you are trying to create fire from 2 stones or 2 sticks. When you see the first signs of smoke coming up, right, then you know, oh, now I am going to able to make fire, right? So that particular state, now where you have faith that you are in the right direction and the fire is going to get lit, right? So that particular state, that pravritti, by getting the divya gandha, divya rupa and so on, you are saying, okay, now I am in the right path, I am going to go towards yoga from this point, right? That particular pravritti is what is being talked about, and what happens? Praharshayanti. So makes the practitioner elated. Yoga nishtham sthito nibadnanti. Now his nishtha, the faith in the yoga, that becomes bound in a sthiti, that becomes steadfast. Right? So that is the role of this chitta parikarma as explained in this very beautiful kind of analogy.
Finally, as I said last session also, this is technical term. Pravrutti is a technical term. Don't understand it in what we have in common man's parlance. Pravrutti, sat pravrutti, dush pravrutti. So that's a bent of mind, makeup of mind, bent of mind. So we say he is sat pravrutti, he is a good pravrutti, he has a bad pravrutti. Here it's a technical term, so don't mess up with the popular meaning of the word pravrutti. This is the pravrutti that you get the bent of mind, inclination of mind, disposition of mind by yoga being inculcated. After having inculcated yogic principles, yogic culture, your bent of mind changes to a state which is more nobler state, which is more nobler state, more sublime state, more balanced state, more essential state. That is called pravrutti. So the mind which is in yoga pravrutti, that chitta is being referred to here as pravrutti, not as in common man's parlance, pravrutti, sat pravrutti, dush pravrutti. We say this is his pravrutti, this is his nature, we say. After all, this is his nature. So pravrutti is used that way in common man's parlance. But that's not the word here, it's technical word, so bear this in mind. That is a technical term. By yoga, by yogic principles inculcated, by yogic influences on you, you get a state, a bent of mind changes. Your behavior pattern of the mind changes. Your reactionary condition of the mind changes. As to how it acts and reacts and responses, it changes because of yoga. So that change which takes you on a higher rung of consciousness, that is being referred to as a pravrutti. So it's a technical term. get impressed on your mind. It's a technical term, pravrutti. Because all English translations will go by the word, literal translations are given, and they are misleading. Unless there is a clarification to the effect that this is a technical term, which Shankara in his commentary makes it clear. Yoga pravrutti. Yoga pravrutti sufficiently inculcated, whatever becomes different change in your pravrutti, that is being referred to. Okay?
Okay, so with this we complete the Sutra 1.35, and next time we can go with the next Sutra. So we'll recite the slokas on Guruji, and then if there are any questions we can take one or two. Vaijñānika shikshakatve kalākāra āsaneshu yaha yogābhyāse ca tattvajñās tam vande sundaram gurum yogavruksho lokesmin vardhito yasya preranaya Yogacharya Gurave Sundaraya Namo Namaha. So any questions? Okay, that's one question.
Last session you had said that you will elaborate on the tongue part of it. So wanted to the elaboration about the tongue. You said it's a deep study. So if you could just.
See, I did say a bit about even today. The Vidya Devata Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom, resides in the tongue. That's why if you want to understand the wisdom of the person, you must make the person speak. Face will not show you the person is wise. The movements of the person will not show you that the person is wise. You must make the person speak. Then you will know that the person is really wise or not wise, and how much wise. So wisdom is reflected through the organ of speech. Whereas for psychology, all intelligence is in the brain. The brain scan will never tell you whether somebody is a wise person or unwise person. Brain scan will never divulge that somebody is wise or somebody unwise. Whole body scan and brain scan and MRI and whatever is inside, mechanical insight is possible. With all that insights, you will not see difference between anatomy of you and me, anatomy of Gyaneshwar and Tukaram. Do you follow? So what we call as brain scanners, what do they scan? They scan the brain. They don't find any intelligence there or caliber of intelligence there. However, we relate intelligence to our brain. So the fact of the matter is that our brain is a monitor of the intelligence, actually. See, in the Wimbledon is going on, you see that in your television box. And the Wimbledon is not being played behind the screen. It's played somewhere else, 6,000 miles away from here. But you see that on the screen of the television. Is that right? Similarly, the intelligence that we conceive and perceive is only monitored in the brain. Where it happens is not divulged by anatomy, physiology or psychology or neurology. So actually the wisdom is in esoteric physiology, it is all in the heart. Heart, not coronary heart. Again, this heart will not be you will be getting in a scan. When you say, I love you from bottom of the heart, will the heart scan or MRI, will that show that this is love really from bottom of the heart? We refer to some other heart, not coronary heart. When you say, I like this from my heart, I heartily wish you, I heartily do something, I heartily say something. You can't get it in coronary heart. So we refer to another heart, which we all believe, but we have not seen it. We have not seen it. We all believe. Is that right? Nowhere anatomy will show you that your emotional heart is here. This is the emotional heart. No, it will only show coronary heart. There is a beautiful passage in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It's called Hridaya Brahmana. Hridaya Brahmana. Beautiful poetic description. Very, very lyricized. If you look into it, and you will also like to chant it. You will like to chant it. So says everything is in the heart. Whatever the eyes see, whatever the essence of it goes to heart. Whatever the ears hear, essence is in the heart. All perceptions, all mental acts, all intellectual all acts, all emotional acts, they are in the heart. Heart is source of all psychomental activities, consciousness activities. However, we believe in exoterics that the consciousness is in the brain. Conscious, unconscious condition means we think of the brain of the person. But esoterics say that it is somewhere else. Consciousness is not turned out in the brain, consciousness is monitored in the brain. And therefore you will have to check your consciousness from brain. Similarly, the tongue here, our speech organ of human beings is enormous. Last time I said if the crow is happy, it will say cow, 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 cow. If the crow is sad, it will say cow, 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 cow. If the crow is hungry, it will say cow, 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 cow. Because their oral organ is not evolved. We are given marvelous human organ. So again, that's too deep a purport as to what is this oral organ. Vagdevi, Saraswati, wisdom organ. And then 4 class of speeches that we have. Para, Pashanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari. Enormous subject matter. And the Saraswati is presiding deity over that speech organ. We only know this express speech, that's all. We do not know the other layers of the speech, which ancient wisdom of the lore, they have explored it. Para, Pashanti, Vaikhari, Madhyama Vaikhari. So this is Vaikhari, which I am speaking and you are hearing. You are not hearing the speech underlying my Vaikhari. I have got many things to tell you. I am not telling you. I cannot tell you. If I tell you, you won't hear. If I tell you, if I hear, you won't understand. If I tell you, you might hear, you won't understand. But there is so much bubbling under my speech organ which doesn't come up, which cannot come up. So there is Madhyama. Then underlying that there is something else. Pashyanti. Underlying that there is Para, supreme. Para means supreme. So it's a great study. Don't expect in 5-10 minutes to hear about it. It's a different subject matter. And it will be unwieldy for you at this caliber, at this status. So Para, Pashanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari is total study of oratory organ. And we know only this organ is only blabbers. And as I said, it is nothing but it is gutter. What we are doing with our organ of speech. But we are just spoiling it. We are not understanding the potentials of it, purpose of it, and we are using it. So it has enormous culture, how to culture the speech organ. It's an enormous scheme. And we know only that somebody is speaking clearly. Oh, wonderful speech. He can speak very clearly. And then next is he speaks wise. He should be speaking wise, not just clearly. But there is so much behind wisdom. Wisdom comes from deep mine. You'll have to do a lot of mining. for wisdom to surface. Wisdom will not come by just Googling. Do you follow? You just can't be Googling and getting wisdom. It's not so easily available. A lot of excavation takes place. It comes from very deep plane of our consciousness. It is enormous excavation, wisdom. So find out how deep the Saraswati might be going, how deep the tongue also goes. We know that the tongue is just above the throat, but how deep it can go. So well, that's, again, as I said, it's the mysticism. Let's experience something in our life. Then all these things will be getting open to us. Anyway, just ponder over this. Our speech organ is just a marvel. Just a marvel. We have incompatibilities between our mind and speech. Therefore, first prayer you must have, Vang me manasi pratisthita, mano me vachi pratishtitam. Let my mind be established in the speech, and let my speech be established in mind. Unless these establishments are there, we will not divulge what the oral organ is, what the mind is. We have total discord between our mind and our speech. What is in mind is one thing, what we speak is altogether different. So that's why that's a Shanti mantra. Let my speech be established in mind, let my mind be established in speech. That's the basic requirement for truth. Truth speaking is not as easy as we think. Just not lying is not truth. See, if you want to, if you ask me, request me to open it out, I can add more confusions. Just not lying is not speaking truth. Speaking truth is speaking truth. Understand this. For that, this establishment is so important. If that establishment is not there, you and me will never speak the truth. Get to know this. Because there are incompatibilities between mind and speech. So first that must be established. And for that, our first lesson for that is go for speechly acts in asanas. Vachik Kriya. Read in the book what is Vachik Kriya. Don't think asana is something to be done with muscles, bones, tissues, joints, tendons, shin, calf, femur, ham, shoulder, deltoid, trapezium, sternum. It's not just a physical exercise. There is a Vachik Kriya. So there you will have field to speak the truth. We can only speak the truth within us. Once we open the mouth, it is prone to be untruthful. So if you want to speak the truth, go on speaking inwards. Speak unto you. Don't speak to anyone. Keep speaking to you. You will take recourse to truth. If you speak to others, you will take recourse to. So therefore, first step in, mystic saint again says, first step to practice Satya. What is it? First step to practice Satya is to speak the minimum. Speak as much as just essential. Don't speak anything more than essential. Atyavashyak. एवढंच बोला. हे पहिली पायरी आहे. First step is to speak minimum. Our mouth is tireless organ. Our mouth is a tireless organ. Have you ever noticed this? We are never tired of blabbering. Our legs will get tired, hands will get tired, eyes will get tired, ears will get tired. The mouth will never get tired. And simple reason, that is all the time damp. If you are in waters, you won't get tired easily. If you are walking in waters, you won't get tired easily. If you walk on terrain, you will get easily tired. It's always damp and wet, and therefore tireless. Is anyone said, the tongue is tired? Never, never. It is hydrated. So understand hydration, dehydration aspect there also. So, Satya comes from tongue. So understand how it might be great organ. That's the organ to practice truth. Therefore, it must have enormous potentials, enormous glories. Otherwise, it is not possible to be practicing such a high principle, such a great principle. If the speech and truth has so close relationship, understand what must be underlying the mouth. What must be the potentials of the mouth. So, first step is that you start exploring yourself. What must be the mouth? Okay.
Okay. Thank you.